California. I mean, you think what it did to them. This is nasty.
You
Oh,
don't know want to know how
terrible.
cold it is
Absolutely
here.
terrible.
I just got a thing that says the content of this meeting is being sent to a third party. What's that mean?
YouTube.
Go to YouTube.
Oh, okay. So you finally sent
It
it.
goes it goes from Zoom to YouTube.
Okay. So tell me when.
We go.
Ready?
Right?
Well, I'm waiting for him to do the intro thing, like a host does.
Yeah.
Host with the most.
Use that so I don't get weird feedback. All right. It looks like we are live.
Okay. Greetings.
Excellent.
Well, this time we're gonna do five favorite albums from 1975, and there was a lot of them. I had to dwindle my list from 20 down to 5. It was tough, and I'm sure
I started at 15, I think.
Yeah, same.
I got it down to a few, but a lot of them I haven't, we're getting ready to just move stuff out. So a lot of them are in boxes, I mean, that rack behind me is one of mine, but most of it's empty right now. So all of a sudden on such notice, I went, okay, just grabbing this and one special interesting. Anyway, so I'm going first.
All right. Yeah, you're going first.
Okay. All right. So just let me say this, 1975, the year for me was just out of high school, first year into college, so there's a lot of partying going on, having a good time and everything. And I listened to a lot of different music that we would hear on the radio, the FM radio here on Long Island, New York. And some of it was really good. And it was tough to pick, but I went ones that kind of stood out to me. So the first one, my number 5, I guess, if you will, is Triumvirate and Spartacus, which I happen to like this a lot. I thought it was great, because it's a concept album, and I think they did really good with it. Also, keeping in mind that these guys were they on the ELP label and they wanted to be the next ELP, type of thing. So
Yeah, I liked it better than Disillusion, which was
yeah,
also amazing.
good stuff, good stuff. But that was my number 5. So who's ever next? Go for it.
All right.
In 1975, I was 11, so all of my choices are things I discovered long after it passed. Because
yeah, but this is 75,
I
not
think I was listening
65.
to Slade and T-Rex. Was pretty much what I was listening to back then, at that age. So my first up, I had a mass of them, and I've weeded out the ones which I think everybody else will pick. So if nobody else picks them, and we do an honourable mentions at the end, I'll flag the obvious ones then. But to try and keep away from everybody else, I'm doing Henry Cow's In Praise of Learning.
I think
Henry Cow, the rock and opposition band who started in the 60s. This was their 3rd album. It was the first one with the Slap Happy members incorporated. So you get Dagmar Krause on vocals for the first time on this album. And it's what I would consider the definitive Henry Cow album of the 4 studio albums. It's the most typical of their material. It's also probably their most political in terms of content. It's got a fair amount of left-wing political comment in terms of the song structure and the rest of the content. It's red cover and has some other elements of it associated with that. But it's a pretty definitive rock and opposition album from one of the main bands of the scene. So that's my first of 5, no particular order.
Very good.
All right, Gary.
Okay, well, I started with 15 and sort of weeded it down. And hopefully nobody did any of the ones I'm doing, but they're kind of obvious ones, some of them. But I started, and I'm going in chronological order, all from 75, but the order they were released in the year. Starting with Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. And you know what? You can say what you want about it. Some people say there's a lot of filler on the album, but frankly, I don't think there are any songs I don't like. And I love Zeppelin anyway, because it's like every album is completely different. And, they're just different albums. And this has Kashmir, which might be an obvious choice, but it's probably my 3rd or 4th favorite Zeppelin song. So, you got to love it for that. It's a hell of an album.
Yeah, I'm just one of those people that like yourself, I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan. I've got last time I going on Discogs, I think it was, I was able to get up to like 3,500 albums so far, and I still got a ton to go. ELP is my biggest collection. When you get right under that, you're looking at Led Zeppelin. And something I can say, I was at one of the three shows at Madison Square Garden that
Wow.
became The Song Remains the Same album and movie
Oh
Oh,
wow.
wow.
in
Damn.
1973. I mean, whoa.
That's one of my big regrets is never getting to see Zeppelin. When
Twice.
in 1980, when they were getting ready to tour, they were going to be playing Chicago Soldier Field, and my brother, because let's see, eight. Well, anyway, by the way, 75. I would have been 12. So and some of this stuff I got into later. But anyway, so I was 17. My brother had ordered tickets because you had to do them from mail order, and we were gonna have tickets coming, and then Bonham died, and that was the end of that, and I didn't get to see them. But I still think they're one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time. I love that band.
I would have to agree. Great band.
Yeah.
Oh, Gary, I completely agree. Same thing for me. I was this close to get Led Zepp tickets when we learned of Bonham's death. I was in college at the time.
So
All right.
frustrating. It was like, that was going to be a dream come true to see those guys. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, there's always dream bands. I mean, they were great live. I mean, you know what got me though, and I'm sorry to go off on this, but as being someone who's in production, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Does the concert production and everything. When I look back at the movie and I look at their lighting system and everything, today we'd have more lights on the drummer than they had on the entire stage. You know what I mean? It's like the biggest thing they did was when they finished Stairway to Heaven in the middle of Madison Square Garden, they had a couple of mirror balls, disco mirror balls, and they hit them so the lights went around everybody. And when you consider everybody was stoned out of their face anyway, it went over real well.
All right, Robert, you're up.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. My first album, it's a classic from that era, Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. I've got
I
it
nearly
on
picked that one.
vinyl, on CD, on audio cassette. It's a monster of an album.
No
Um,
8-track?
Pardon me?
No 8-track?
No, unfortunately. Basically, right after the monster success of Dark Side in 1973, the band came up with the perfect concept album, which incorporated an almost surreal, ethereal sound and some of their most catchy, unforgettable melodies. The song Shine On was a tribute to their old band member, Sid Barrett, who wasn't well at all at that time, unfortunately, with monster hits like Shine On, Have a Cigar, Wish You Were Here, Welcome to the Machine. All of those still regularly playing on the radio after 50 years. It was truly Pink Floyd at their creative and musical peak, well, for me at least.
Yeah, and if you look at the list on Wikipedia for the top or all the releases in 1975, 95% of those artists are still popular on radio.
Yeah, I believe that.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, you can go back to 2000 and you might find 25 bands or maybe 1,000 bands, but I don't even think 1,000, but you'd find a good majority, but nothing like 1975. It was an amazing year.
The golden age of music, period.
Yeah. I would say the 70s.
That's my favorite Floyd album.
The mid 70s and to mid 80s were, bar none, some of the best music that came out. But that's just my opinion.
You're up, Nick.
Oh, okay. Hey, how's it going? Man. So I'm going to do something a little different than I think everyone here is doing. I'm going to pick 5 from 1975. But instead of going back and looking at everything that came out that year and saying this was a great album, I want to pick 5 albums that I actually discovered in 75 and not 1976, 79, 82,
Right.
93. You know, a lot of this stuff that came out, I was unaware of till many years later. So I'm going to pick five that came out. I was 16 years old. I was in high school, and I was lucky in love. And one of the albums I was going to play or be announced was Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy by Elton John. I can't find my copy, so I had to replace it. What I'm replacing it with is Gary Wright, Dreamweaver.
Oh, wow.
Now, the reason I like this is because it had a great hit song, right? But it was a very special song of my girlfriend at the time, and I fell in love with it. And I was a fan of his, anyways, from Spooky Tooth, which he was in prior to that. You know, I think from 72, 74, something like that. And then he went solo. So this would be, and I'm not doing it in any particular order. I'm just grabbing stuff and talking about it. So I highly recommend that you guys check this out. It's a great album. It's progressive, but it's pop, it's artsy, it's rock, just good stuff.
All right. Well, my first pick, speaking of artsy, 10cc, the original soundtrack.
That was on my list. Not anymore.
I got them because a friend of mine who used to do reviews for me, he did some of them, and I was like, going, okay, I like what he said, so I went and checked them out, and then I got just recently last year they put out a box set with all their albums up to 90 some, early 90s, and I'm going to butcher that first song title because I don't speak French, but it's I'll just do the English translation. One Night in Paris. This is the starting off the album really on a, to me, an epic scale. Setting the stage for what they're all about. I mean, they're art rock basically with a lot of pop, a lot of quirkiness, and this song here, it's just like it's like a little mini epic, just going through the motions. And I like the one line, "One night in Paris is like a year in every other place." So I don't know the meaning for that, but I just thought it was kind of cute the way they did that. But the big hits off this is obviously "I'm Not in Love," and then kind of a minor hit was "Life is Minestrone." I absolutely love this band. I mean, they're many times they remind me of Queen, and other times they don't. They're just their own self. And this is one I've been listening to death for ever since I got it a year ago. So that's my first choice.
Okay, I guess I'm up again. Here's something I think everybody likes. The Snow Goose, Camel.
You know,
No, I know
Very
it's not
good.
popular with everybody, but
Excellent.
I like it. I listened to it a lot, and fortunately, it took a lot of years, but I finally got to see them live, like in 2002, I think it was down in
2003.
three. Okay. Oh, you were there, right? Yeah.
Oh, yes, I was.
They put on a great show. They were really good.
I saw them in two.
It's good. I mean, if you look at everything I'm doing, it's kind of like not really avant. There's nothing like heavy metal. I mean, I'm just into like, but almost like you'd say, like almost in some ways, like pop prog, at the time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And this was getting airplay on Long Island, at least on the FM stations at the time. So it was cool, But I don't ever remember them. I'm sure they did. I just missed them coming around and touring in my area at the time. But it's a great album. I think if you're starting out with Camel, you didn't know them, I would recommend that be the first one you would check out and listen to. And I think
Well, there's the three, isn't there? There's that. There's Mirage.
yeah. But I mean, I think that would be like, your entry, you learn
Oh, yeah.
based on that, you would want to explore more,
Totally. I agree.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
My number 2,
You are.
Mike Oldfield, Ommadawn.
Yes.
This
Right.
was the third of his solo albums. His original one was a blockbuster, Tubular Bells. He had the hit off that with the Exorcist movie, but the next two he really moved into his wheelhouse with what you probably call pastoral prog. They were sidelong epics on both Hergest Ridge and on Ommadawn. To me, they're my favourite Oldfield albums before he started moving a bit more into the pop realm. The next 4 or 5 albums, he did like a sidelong classic and then a bunch of shorter songs, more poppy songs on the rest of the album. When he was doing sidelong classics, that's pretty much the stuff I love of his. So, as usual, everything done himself, a few guest musicians on to help out here and there, but it was pretty much his show.
All right, sure, you're up.
Okay, well, for the next one, another hard rock album, Nazareth, Hair of the Dog.
Yes.
And everybody points to the 2 hits on there, the title track and Love Hurts, but man, everything is great on this album. And personally, I think Please Don't Judas Me is as good as anything else on there. It's just such a good song. It's just great blues rock. I remember at one time I saw these guys live more times than I'd seen any other band. Now I've surpassed them quite a few times since, but at one time they were the band I'd seen live more times than anybody. Just such a good band.
Amazing band.
Fantastic. My turn?
All right, your turn.
Okay. My next album, a classic of the Canterbury era, Hatfield and the North, the Waters Club.
A good band.
Fantastic.
They're good live.
It's one of Canterbury's most memorable lineup. You've got Phil Miller, Dave Stewart, Richard Sinclair, and Pip Pyle. Waters Club was the second album from Hatfield, and in essence, their final studio album, only followed by compilations and live albums. The band was the first headliner at our Montreal FMPM Festival in 2006. And a few people know about this story, much to our dismay. Pip Pyle sadly died just a few weeks before the festival. That was a stressful time for a few days, but Richard Sinclair called us and reassured us that the show must go on and that Mark Fletcher would take over the drum duties, being familiar with Pip's work on the 2 Hatfield albums. Their performance was pure perfection and very, very emotional.
A brilliant album.
Indeed.
Probably my favorite Canterbury album.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them live. They played at Nearfest. They were really cool. Nice guys to work with and everything.
Yeah, and Pip Pyle was still around, and for at the time.
Never got to see them.
Yeah, I did too.
All right, Nick, you're up.
Oh, okay. The next one I'm going to do is I don't have the vinyl version of it.
You don't have the vinyl?
Huh?
You don't have a vinyl version of something?
Yeah, but I've got something better.
Oh, box set.
It comes in this.
Okay.
It's the entire Aerosmith collection up to I can't remember which album it is now, but it was like the first 15 or 20 albums.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, the album I'm going to talk about is Toys in the Attic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not prog, but definitely an album that sparked a lot of imagination, drove the girls crazy. Just drove them crazy. Steven Tyler, probably one of the best frontmen out there. One of my favorites, should I say. I shouldn't say best because there's always someone better. So he's one of my favorite frontmen out there as far as a rock band goes. What made him special, not only does he have charisma and the look and the sound. But he did something that I don't think anyone else really has in the history of music. And he's got a certain signature throttle or sound that he does for every song. It might be a snake sound, that is kind of raspy, or it might be some words that he just kind of rambles on.
Huh.
It's only done once in the song, you know. It's he always does it during the intro, and I thought that was really unique. And this album had so many hits off of it. It was basically a greatest hits album, even though it wasn't. It was their third album. And I highly recommend anyone that's into, just music for the sake of music, grab a copy. It's good.
Yeah, I've got that. I've got a few Aerosmith albums. I don't have the box set though, but I've got a few.
Yeah, I got that a few years ago. It was when I still had my record store. So it was 2004 when I bought it. So
Oh,
That's a few years ago. Yeah,
I
only
think their
21.
albums,
yeah.
I think their
Big
albums,
deal.
up, I
only,
think their
only.
albums from the first album up through Draw the Line are all incredible.
Yeah.
After that, it got to be a little questionable, but
See, to me, music, I don't judge albums by previous albums. I believe every album should be judged on its own merit because it can't be, you can't recreate a certain feel or certain sound because to me, all music, every release, every piece of music that's ever been recorded, to me is a concept album in a sense. It captures a moment in time, right? So when Led Zeppelin did, Four, whatever political beliefs, whatever girlfriends they had, whatever the environment was like,
Right.
what they were listening to, those are all things that created the sound of Led Zeppelin then, which changed down the road. So I kind of believe that that's kind of with all styles of music. I don't think it's for any particular style. So, but you're right. I mean, they had albums that weren't as good. They had ones that were better. I mean, and we're all going to have our favorites.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, we're going to kick it into a little heavier territory
Oh,
and bring out Black Sabbath Sabotage.
oh, gotta have it.
That one was
Gotta
gonna
have
be
it.
on my list till I
Gotta
found
be
it
in the
was on your
list.
I got into Black Sabbath in the early 90s. And when I came across this one, I was like going, this thing, it didn't sound like 1975. I mean, some of the guitar work on Symptom of the Universe had a more thrashy sound, and I think this is possibly, along with the previous album, is their most progressive of their. And it's also I've heard some people say it's also the most bloated because the longer songs. But I tend to like some of those longer songs. I mean, like Nick was saying, it documents that moment in time. They were going through legal trouble. They got ripped off by the management. Like almost every 70s band at one time got ripped off by the management. And like I said, I like Symptom of the Universe, Megalomania, and The Writ. And then they had a short song called Am I Going Insane, which since I was 9 when this was out, so I don't remember if it was ever played on the radio. Am I Going Insane? But
That might have
to
been
me,
a
this is
side.
yeah. It's for me. I think it's their peak moment.
I was gonna say for me, it might be an odd choice, but Megalomania is one of my 2 favorite Sabbath songs. I just
Same
love
here.
it.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it was just an amazing album. I mean, it's like to this date, it's one of those albums that I have to listen to it from beginning to end. I can't just cherry pick the songs.
I think that's part of a bookend series for me, because it was that and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And they both felt like they were cut from the same cloth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was going to.
To me, it was the end of that first era with Ozzy.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
style changed a bit on Technical Ecstasy, but that first run of albums through Sabotage, they're flawless, the first run.
Yeah, yeah. I just, you know, I mean, like I've said, Symptom of the Universe. That could have been made in
Amazing.
1985.
Yeah, it's a fantastic album.
They were always pushing the envelope and experimenting, though. They were, I mean, people like to think of them as like a not necessarily a thinking band, but if you really pay attention, they were always trying different things, and they were never really content to stay in one place for very long, I don't think.
And I watched a documentary, Bill Ward. He approached drums from a jazz point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I thought made that band special because of that. You know, he wasn't coming from a rock and roll point of view. He was coming from a jazz point of view, which I think made the songs even more special.
And the other part of the rhythm section, Geezer, is such an underrated bass player. That man is amazing.
Brilliant.
And without him, I don't think it would have worked as well with Bill's drumming, because they gelled together really well, because Geezer could pull off some of that jazz sort of thing too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and to me, they were very progressive, not in the sense that of Yes or ELP, but they were progressive in the fact that they always, as you said, Ron, they were always changing up and moving forward and trying to do different things, trying different experimentally, trying different sounds and techniques, and heavier stuff, longer stuff, shorter stuff. So in that respect, they were very progressive. As far as being a prog band, no, but they were very progressive as far as a hard rock, blues influenced rock band.
And then of course the infamous album cover that.
Oh, love that! Yeah,
it's a dreadful album cover.
It's a horrible
I know.
album cover.
I think it's listed as I want to say in the top 100 horrible album covers of all time. I mean, there's obviously a lot worse, but the choices of the outfits,
the leggings were a mistake.
Yes.
Yeah, a big mistake. And it looked like Ozzy was coming out of some sort of Japanese festival or something. But anyways, that's my second choice.
Good choice.
Let me get to my third. This is a little more in Ian's wheelbarrow, if you will. This is Gentle Giant, Freehand.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great album. This is the one that I really discovered them on, and then I went to the back catalog. I bought this one recently because there's a DVD with it, and there's a surround sound mix.
Oh, nice.
But it's a weird surround sound mix because it's only 4.1. There's no subwoofer channel.
Okay.
But it's a great album. Songs like, Freehand and Just the Same and stuff, stand out. And through my working on festival, like different places like, FMPM and that, got to meet some of the guys and interact with them, and got to really get to know Gary Green, who, if you were hanging out in a bar with Gary Green all night, you didn't know who Gary Green was. At the end of the night, you wouldn't know who Gary Green was. You know what I mean? He's just a normal guy, not flying the flag. But man, when he picks up a guitar, your jaw just drops. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got into them in the 90s. I was going to some concert in LA, and this one guy was blasting, was it Playing the Fool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was blasting that from his car, so I had to come closer and go, who's this? And he told me. I said, okay, what's the album? And he told me, and I said, okay. So the next day I went and went to the couple record stores to find it.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right.
Next up for me, Van de Graaff Generator, God Bluff.
Very good.
This was
Great band.
Van der Graaf had an original run of albums, but then took a 2.5 year hiatus after Porn Hearts, and this was their comeback album after that break, and it rips. It's as heavy and as dark as that band ever got. To me, it's up there with Porn Hearts as the best of their material. They're kind of symphonic, but they're kind of the real dark end of the pool of symphonic. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Look at that.
Box set. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's spiffy. Wow.
Very nice.
It's heavy. It's heavy.
They're kind of to me they're one of the best of the original 70s prog bands out there in terms of the type of music they were playing connected with me on the dark, the visceral end. Hamill's vocals are not for everyone, but I love those vocals.
And they're good live too. They're very good.
Terrific live. Yeah.
I've seen them twice, and it was like, whoa, you know.
So that's my third one, I think.
I met Mr. Hamill, and he's quite a wonderful human being and a great musician.
Yeah, he also did a solo show once at Nearfest, just him and his grand piano, and it was like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here's time.
Back around to me, and this time I've got a vinyl to show off.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Hawkwind.
Warrior on the Edge of Time. Now this, to me,
Great
their
live
best
band.
album is Hall of the Mountain Grill, but this one comes in a close second.
Yeah.
It's
those
probably
two.
the most traditionally prog thing.
What album is that? I missed it.
Was that? Warrior on the Edge of Time by Hawkwind.
Ah, good album.
Yeah, and you've got Michael Moorcock stuff on there. I think, as I recall, he did Magnu, I think, on that, and it's like it does a great combination of their poetry stuff and space stuff and rocking, and it's a great cross section of what makes Hawkwind so great.
Yeah, agree.
It's an excellent album. One of their best, I think, definitely.
Yeah, in that run, that block around that time, they had a bunch of great albums. That's one of my favorites. Love that one.
Yeah.
All right.
My turn. All right. My next album. It's Voyage of the Acolyte by Steve Hackett.
Yeah.
It's Steve's first solo album, released in 1975. It was recorded just after the end of the Lamb Lies Down tour with Genesis. Steve was still a member of Genesis at the time, and he left the band in the summer of 1977 and only released his next album, Please Don't Touch, in the spring of 78. So 3 years between the two solo albums. Voyage of the Acolyte was a great album. All of his creative energy bottled up for years resulted in a truly brilliant first release with great songs like Ace of Wands, Tower Struck Down, Star of Sirius, Shadow of the Hierophant, and featuring a pretty cool lineup that included Mike Rutherford, Percy Jones, Phil Collins, and Sally Oldfield. It's a true standard in my collection, definitely.
Very cool.
All right, Nick, you're up.
Nick?
Okay, this probably won't come as a surprise to anyone. I first discovered this band when they did an album called Sheer Heart Attack before 75. And the next album I discovered was A Night at the Opera. Now, this album is special because they did so many things that other bands at that point had not done, whether it was the vocal theatrics, the kind of operatic / rock / prog / art rock. I mean, they were a little bit of everything. They even had some blues. They even if you go back to some of their earlier stuff, they had some stuff that was almost punky. They were very, very versatile. And this had so many hits off of it. I can't even I mean, it's basically every song on this thing is just fantastic. Brian May's guitar playing is great. Freddie Mercury's vocals
Oh,
are amazing. You know, I mean, there isn't there's a lot of bands out there where there's that one musician that's in the band that just kind of is there, and you don't really know anything about him or notice him, or he just kind of doesn't stand out.
you mean the bass player?
This band, everyone had a part to play and was, right there. But unlike some bands, they actually did their own part in their own time. They didn't play against each other, they played together. And which created a very, very unique sound, in my opinion. So that's what number three. Yeah, number three.
Well, I had that, and I'll add something to it. I got into these guys, Queen, in 1981 when I got that greatest hits thing on cassette, and I wore that out. I had to buy another copy. I think I did it 2 times because first copy the thing snapped, the tape snapped, and second one it got all crinkled up. So I think I had 3 of them by that time, and then I started looking into where each of those songs came from, and this was the first album that I went to proper about it, and like I was saying with Black Sabbath, that they had some manager issues starting off the thing, Death on Two Legs,
Yeah, they didn't want to release this album.
Yeah,
the label didn't.
Yeah, they didn't want to release Bohemian Rhapsody as a
single,
a single, and
which became their biggest hit.
Yeah, and what a lot of people, they had a song that was basically almost like I guess you could either say a brother or a sister to it, the Prophet song,
which is my favorite Queen song.
Yeah, that is their darkest, one of their darkest sounding songs, and it just, like you were saying, it goes through everything. I mean, it's got like old time sounding music, and then I found out recently that 39 was not 1939; it was 2039. So it was talking about space, So but he did it in a way that it was like a 1930s style song, and I like that they can do that and still all these different styles, especially in this album, and still, each time every song you say, that's Queen, that's Queen, who they are.
Yeah, and the thing about the album as well is when they layered their vocals, those were actually done in takes. Not like today where it's, you can do it digitally and go, oh, how many layers do we want? Well, let's repeat that 19 times and just offset them by a millisecond or whatever. That was actually done painstakingly. And then someone had to cut all those pieces and tape them together with the regular tape if they know anything about how, music is made. It's a feat in itself.
If I might, there's a story I remember hearing, not that album, mind you, but it was what was it, News of the World or Jazz, whichever album had We Won't Rock You on it.
News of the World.
News of the World. And when they needed to get the sound of the stomping sound, they just had a board that they would stomp on. And Brian May, being the genius that he is, sat down and did all the calculations he needed to figure out how to make that sound like a stadium full of people, how many iterations they would have, what reverb they would have to put on it. Physicist that he is, he figured it out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. On Night at the Opera, I think up until that point, or maybe it hasn't really, no one's surpassed it, had the most overdubs. I would say for 1975, it had the most overdubs out of any album released.
May have.
And
I saw the News to the World tour with Queen, and it was off the hook. I mean, for the time, the production they were carrying with them was off the hook. They had a big circular lighting truss designed to look like a crown, but it was on the stage. in the beginning of the show. And in the darkness, they would just start playing a soundtrack of like boom, 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 to get the crowd going. And once the crowd
Right.
started going, all of a sudden a light picked up Freddie Mercury off stage right, starts singing. A little while later, here comes Brian May, just with a spotlight on him, bringing in, the guitar licks and everything that go with "We Will Rock You." Then they just set off like a rocket sound, and that whole circular truss I was telling you about, with being pushed, that just like went up. And there's the stage, there's drums, there's bass, and then they went into a really fast version of "We Will Rock You."
Yeah.
And then from there, they went right into "Tie Your Mother Down," and the place went nuts.
I can imagine.
And that song now is the #1 song played at all football games, baseball games, basketball games.
Hockey
Yeah.
games.
Well, I mean, think about it. You start a soundtrack playing in the PA system. I don't care what kind of event it is, of the stomps and the claps. People are going to join in.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're doing it in a stadium where your team is winning, it's going to be
Right.
even more intense.
Oh yeah.
But that's the genius behind some of these guys. They knew how to bring the audience into the fold.
Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely.
And once you've done that, you're there. You're gold. You know what I mean?
Your turn,
All
Ron.
right, Chuck. No, Chuck.
No,
Oh.
you were.
No, Ron did Queen again. So it's
Oh, he
you,
did it
Ken.
Yeah, I
again.
did.
Oh, I didn't
yeah.
realize. I thought you were just commenting. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's something. This is a band that we all love. Unfortunately, they don't tour anymore. But Rush, Fly By Night. Not necessarily the best album they put out, in my opinion, but it's the one that caught my ear.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
Fantastic album.
And yeah, it absolutely is. And I saw them live once, but it wasn't on this album tour. I think it was I forget which one, but they were cool. And they had Fleetwood Mac opening for them. Believe that? And we're talking like the late 70s, maybe 1980. You know what I mean?
You're right.
And it was great. I mean, but this album, this caught me, and then I became a fan. And now I've got, well, this is one of them, part one, but I've got all three somewhere. Oh yeah, I didn't put it in there, right? But three box sets, the Rush box sets. I've got this, I've got the other ones, and I've got a ton of their stuff in surround. Like you are to vinyl, Nick, I am to surround stuff. I love it, and it's unbelievable. But that's my number two, I guess.
No order for me. Next one for me, Tangerine Dream, Rubicon.
Rubicon, yes.
So this was the second of the albums from their Virgin period, when they were essentially forming the Berlin School type of electronic sound. It was a shift away from their more industrial ambient sound that they put through their first four albums, but it has the classic lineup of the band. Again, two sidelong tracks that I particularly like in that type of music, but deep electronica from Tangerine Dream, probably one of my top three Tangerine Dream albums, along with the ones at that period, Fadra and Ricochet, the supposed live album, are the three that I pull out most often when I'm looking for Tangerine Dream, along with this one.
Very ethereal.
Very, very ethereal. Yeah, they got a bit more upbeat on the later albums. The first three were a lot more ambient, ethereal, atmosphere type albums.
Cool.
Well, I guess that
Sure.
brings us back around to me. And I'm gonna go with something a little different, but cool. Jefferson Starships, Red Hot
Yeah.
Chili
Yes.
You know, a
Like
lot
that
of people
album.
just think of them as sort of a pop band, but even the hits, there was a lot going on with those. And in my opinion, Grace Slick is probably the greatest female rock vocalist of all time. And I love how their vocal arrangements are a lot more complex than you think they are. If you just aren't really paying attention to the song, they've got lines of vocals coming in different directions and all kinds of stuff going on. And they were, they had gotten to that point. They were what, 2, 4, 6, and 8 member band. And they were really putting out some great music. You got some big hits on there, but you've also got a lot of just really cool stuff.
Yeah, they were one of my favorite bands, and early on because Papa John Creech
Yes.
was one of the most phenomenal violinists.
Yep.
My first one was that I discovered was Jean Dupont when he was
Oh yeah.
Zappa, you know,
Yeah.
and then I heard Airplane with Papa John Creech, and rest his soul. That guy could play the fiddle. It wasn't violin, it was the fiddle, and man,
Yeah.
he could play.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess he had never heard of them when they asked him to join the band. He was just like, well, okay, it's a paying gig, I'll take it.
Yep.
Right.
Fantastic. All right, my turn.
Yes,
Now
sir.
for some Canadian content. Manège by Manège. That's a self-titled album. It's one of Quebec's longest running prog rock bands. They formed in
Really?
1972, but
Wow.
released their first self-titled album only 3 years later in 75. They had an elegant classical instrumental style, which was quite experimental at times, and their lineup was composed of highly skilled musicians, resulting kind in a poppy, prog, avant-garde sound. They opened for Soft Machine in 1974 in Montreal. The music of Manège was also featured at FMPM 2006 with founding member Jérôme Langlois on piano, accompanied by his talented daughter Romy on clarinet, and a who's who of Quebec's finest musician. They played just before Hatfield and the North, actually. The album was re-released on Prague Quebec's label, along with most of Manège discography. And Prague Quebec, of course, is a label that I helped form with Stephen Takasi back in 2005.
Very cool.
All right, Nick.
This is my Elton John replacement album. Because I figured I want to be able to show the cover artwork and stuff. So my replacement for Elton John and his album Captain Fantastic and Modern Cowboy is the debut album by Ambrosia.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
that's a great album.
A classic album.
Yes.
And what made this album great, it had two Grammy nominated or two big hits off of it. Hold on a second here. I gotta look at my notes because Holding On to Yesterday is one of them. That was my favorite song off the album. And then they did oh God, I can't
Very
remember.
nice.
Huh?
Nice,
Nice,
very nice.
nice.
Yeah,
Very nice.
that was the other one. Those were the two singles. And what made this album kind of cool, it was produced by Alan Parsons.
Yes.
And not only that, he was nominated for a Grammy for this album. He also co-wrote, I think, almost every song on the album.
Oh,
So I'd have to go back and look, but I remember seeing that in the credits, Ambrosia and his name, Ambrosia, his name. So
I have a guest.
ah,
beauty.
Yeah, one of three.
the
Black.
Black Beauty.
That's Caesar.
So that was mine. Again, what I liked about them is they were a rock band that had a very heavy prog influence or art rock influence. And to this day, it's you can put it on, and I guarantee that almost anybody, unless you were born in the last 20 years, almost anybody that hears one of those songs immediately knows who they are, or at least knows the
Yes.
song.
Another great song
Right.
off that album is "Time Waits for No One."
Yes.
Yeah,
That to me that's one of my favorite songs on the album
a lot of good stuff.
because that's when I first realized, like when you hear the drums, all of a sudden the bass kicks in the beginning. And all of a sudden you look at it and go, oh, figures, Alan Parsons produced this. You know what I mean? It's like, wow.
Well, the only reason I picked Holding On to Yesterday is one of my favorite tracks is because, excuse me, that was one of the very
Yes.
first tracks I heard by them. And the harmonies and just everything about that song just was classic.
Yeah.
It was definitely a song that was a hit. I mean, and you could feel it and hear it. If you the first time you heard it, you knew, even if you didn't know anything about hits, you
Yeah.
knew that had to be a hit.
Right.
That is definitely a good classic album. It's not going to appeal to everybody. I mean, if you're into like metal, you're into avant and stuff, you may not like it. But if you're someone who's into like good melodic, almost neo-prog, if you will, pop
Yep.
prog, if
Right.
you will, this is an album you want.
Right. And you can see it influenced a lot of bands that came out in the 90s, like Spock's Beard and such. You know, it had that because they had that kind of in that realm, you know. So
I wanted Rob and Chad to bring them into Nearfest, but the Nearfest lineup was very diverse. There was only so many slots for a certain specific genre. You know what I mean? So,
right.
and then if they played any other festivals within a year or two of Nearfest, the appeal was kind of gone. So they
Right.
didn't make it. But hey, you know, we had enough.
All right. Well, my number 4 is from a band named Roxy Music and Siren. This had that song "Love Is a Drug," you know, kind of very kind of pre-disco sounding. The
Probably
drum
one of my
beat,
favorite songs.
And at the same time, it had if you want to give labels, a proto new wave sound at the same time. I mean, and same with Both Ends Burning. It had, you know, you listen to those, and those could have been 80s songs. And like you were saying about Peter Hamill's voice is an acquired taste. I think also Brian Ferry's, because of that quiver he does. And not a lot of people will get it. I mean, I don't know, he had style. You know, not only the way he dressed later on. You know, at the beginning he was kind of dressing in kind of glam rock style outfits. But then by this time he started going into the more suit and ties. You know, looked like he was going for that crooner look. You know, and this one again is another one of these albums. I did not know of these bands when I was 9 years old. So I found out about these guys in the early 90s when I was working at a record store. The manager there, he was kind of like my music teacher because he would put stuff into the player to play, and I liked it. And so, I mean, he taught me about all the different kinds of music that listen, and they kind of catapulted me down a rabbit hole. And
He was probably the first crooner that I got into after the stuff I listened to from my parents' era.
right.
Yeah, he was like a lounge singer, very much a
Yeah.
definitive, and they're a pretty definitive art rock band. If you're thinking art rock, they're one of the names.
They
that,
are.
like,
You know,
And this
it's
one has Eddie Jobson on it.
You know what surprised me about them was, I guess, a year or so ago when all the bands that, you know, were tied up and not being able to do anything with lockdown and COVID and everything, Roxy Music came and played in New York. I fully expected they would be at best Radio City. They sold out Madison Square Garden.
Mhm.
That's 20,000 people.
Yeah.
They were huge in their time.
Yeah, but I'm talking like a year ago. You know?
Particularly in the UK, they were enormous in the UK.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, that happens with a lot of bands. You know, you'll find out that they're huge in one area of the world and you go to another place, nobody's ever heard of them.
Right.
You know, it's funny because you look at internet radio now, and I know that most of you guys can, you know, you're a host, Ian, Nick was a host, Robert understands, Ron understands it. Internet radio today is what FM was back then.
Right.
But
Oh yeah,
the difference is between FM, like you could be in New York listening to this great band, name the band, they're being played on the biggest FM station in New York City. Guys up in Boston have no clue. because they
Yeah.
can't hear it. But it's sort of like what MTV did, is like when they played, you tuned in MTV wherever you were, at least in the United States, you heard it. But with internet radio, you can be anywhere in the world, and if you tune in that radio station, you're going to hear the music. And people, a
Yeah.
lot of people just don't get that. You know?
No, no.
I
So
mean,
that's my number 4.
yeah. I mean, like just get on to one thing. I think of all the music I've discovered, like when I was back when Nick had his vinyl show on House of Prague, and I listened to Ian, on progrock.com, and it's like, wow, great new music to learn. But
Right.
let me get to this. This was a debate which was going to be my number one. I had two of them, but since one has been showing up the whole time. By the way, this is a 5.1 version. Very cool. If you see it, grab it. A band I went to see with some friends, they played at Madison Square Garden. I was only familiar with one or two of their songs on the radio. Went to see the show. It blew the doors off me, and I went out and I bought this.
Kansas.
Kansas.
Kansas Mask.
Mhm.
I think it's a phenomenal album. I think what really makes it, it was the last album before they had their big hit. And you know what happens when they get that big hit? All of a sudden they see where the money's going to come from, so everything starts to change. And I don't care what band you are, what genre you are. The money comes in, the record label's on your case. All of a sudden you realize, hey, I can buy that house. You're going to make the change. Some bands don't, but the majority do. And then 2 or 3 albums later, they're back in the club scene, so.
Yeah, Boston was like one of those bands.
Yeah. Well, Boston, the biggest joke you hear about Boston is they got their first album out for the third time.
Yeah. And I loved them guys. Every album they did was amazing, but
Yeah.
it was like they just rewrote the lyrics and kind of rearranged, a couple notes.
Yeah. Well, let's say the first take we took on that song for the first album, let's change a couple lyrics, we'll put it on the third, that's the way it was. But I agree with you. They were great. They were good. Well, that's me. I have an honorable mention, which, I'll tell you now, which will be this because I had to make a decision. But I will, if you're into this as much as you are.
What is it?
This.
What is
Huh?
it? Which
What is
album
it?
is it?
Oh, this is Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd
Okay.
in 5.1.
I have not seen that cover.
It's unreal.
Yeah,
Okay, my last one, and I'm going to ask for help from Robert here because it's French-Canadian band, and I will butcher the title of the album. This is Harmonium.
Yeah. Si on avait besoin d'une 5e saison. That's a long
There
one.
you go.
That's a mouthful.
This is
album.
their second album. Their first album was a fairly folky album. They're one of the definitive prog rock Quebec bands. This one is a bit more symphonic, but also very folky. All the lyrics are in French. I can't understand a word what they're saying, but he sings them absolutely beautifully. So it's one of my more symphonic favorite albums of that era. But if you're looking for something maybe a little different in the folky symphonic area, look out for the Harmonium album. It's considered a classic of that particular Quebecois genre. Robert,
Indeed.
I'll pass over to you.
Yes, the sound of the singer, Serge Fiori. I mean, this guy had such an amazing, beautiful voice. And even 40, 50 years later, his voice is still the same and still emotional and beautiful. That guy really wrote and created some of the most important music in Quebec history. It's like, the actual history of Quebec's music is pretty much centered around this particular band. They started the whole thing going big time.
Now, I kind of stumbled on them because as when the internet really came on and I started exploring prog, I was going through lists of what are the top 10 symphonic albums, what are the top 10 avant albums, and trawling through all the stuff I didn't know. And this one came up on the list, and it was like, oh, I need that. As soon as I heard it,
Right.
I need that. So no other knowledge of it other than I liked the sound of it when I heard it, which is a good enough reason to buy anything.
Right.
True, absolutely true.
Gary?
Right. Well, 1975 was an interesting year because for a number of reasons, but one of them being You had two Rush albums come out that year.
True.
Caressive Steel, which came out near the end of the year.
True.
The band actually hated this album, at least in retrospect. They said I remember Geddy Lee saying, I know some fans love it, but we really didn't like it. And I do love this album. I mean, you've got Bastille Day, you've got Lakeside Park on there, and then you've got the entire Fountain of Lamneth on the second side of the record, which to me, that suite is just amazing. It was sort of their first real journey towards progressive rock, but yet they still had that real hard edge too. And I still think the album holds up. It's still one of my favorite Rush albums, actually. In fact, I think their best period for me starts with Caress of Steel and goes through Hemispheres, probably. And then after that, it's like, yeah, I like everything. I like everything from Rush, but some I like more, and those are the ones I like the
Right.
most.
Right.
Yeah, I don't necessarily trust an artist when they tell me they don't like an album, because they're generally the ones I find most interesting are the ones that the artist then hate.
And sometimes you've got to understand they're in the studio doing this thing.
Yeah, exactly. They've got a whole other history with the album that none of us
they
have
can
saw.
have a lot of baggage in their heads for it,
Yeah.
Plus, this album was weird because this one very nearly lost them the recording contract because the label was going to drop them. And then their manager went in and talked them into doing one more album, but it had to be a hit album. And then that's when 2112 came out
Right.
of that, and that funny thing there is they were like, well, this is our Screw You album. We're going out in a blaze of glory. And then it became huge and they made it,
Right.
Absolutely.
One of the biggest bands ever.
Yeah.
Very good.
Deservedly so. They made a hell of a lot of sound for three guys.
Yep.
I know.
Fantastic trio. All right, my
Hey,
turn.
Robert.
All right. Speaking of trios, my last album, well, Kevin touched on it a little bit, but I'll expand a little bit. It's Triumvirat, Spartacus. It's the third album from this German trio that was liberally and strongly inspired by The Nice and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Spartacus is a concept album based on the history of the famous gladiator. There were a couple of movies about him. It's gorgeous. It's pompous. It's bombastic prog rock, and with mesmerizing harmonies and melodies, thanks to their keyboardist Jürgen Fritz. They accompanied Supertramp as the opening band on many dates in the US in 1975. And this particular album is the first Canadian edition released in 1975 on Capitol Records. That's my stuff.
Yeah, that and Illusion were my two favorites by them, without a doubt, hands down.
True.
My turn?
Yeah.
This is my last one. And what's really great about today's show is that almost every one of us had something different to talk about. A different album. And I want to touch on something Kevin said. And thank you, Kevin. I'm glad I might have turned you out to a few things. That's something I've always wanted to do. But to take that one step further, I believe that all music is new till you hear it.
Mhm.
I mean, there are so many bands that I have discovered over the years, and even today, to this day, I discover bands I'm going, wow, they've got 5 Grammys, they've been around for 20 years. Where have I been? And there's those bands that don't have the Grammys that were just great prog bands, like let's say Big Big Train or Galahad. Both those bands have been around for like 30 years, and I didn't discover them till I was on radio. So they had already been at that point almost 25, 30 years. So yeah, all music is new till you hear it, in my opinion. So I definitely think that people need to go out and listen beyond the scope that their little box is in. All right.
Right.
People always say there's no good music out there anymore. And my wife and I were talking about this, and I came up with a synopsis for it, or a theory of why that is. And the theory is the most memorable stuff is somewhere between 14 and your early 20s.
Yep.
That's when, because you're not working, you're not raising children, you're not going to college, you don't really have a lot of cares in your life. So
Sounds like me now.
comes, huh?
It sounds like me now.
Yeah, oh, yeah, some of us. But I think so. You have this vision that was the only good music out there.
Right.
But I discover bands every day, whether it's classic rock, southern rock, progressive rock, blues, jazz,
Yeah.
pop, whatever. Bands every day I discover, and I'm always posting on Facebook. I don't even think people think that I have a prog label anymore because I post so much stuff that isn't prog. Sorry, folks. I happen to like everything. To me, music
Nothing
has
wrong
to
with
be
that.
melodic.
Yep.
If it's melodic, then it's gonna attract me. Anyway, so I don't want to go on all night because we'll be here till tomorrow if I do.
I'm gonna say, let me add something to what you were saying about music is new until you hear it. And a lot of people, there's a lot of people who are like, well, you're gonna have to get used to streaming at some point. I despise streaming music. I won't do it. They're like, well, you're gonna run out of music. No, I won't. Do you know how much music is out there that I've never heard?
Yeah.
That I
You'll
can
never hear
pick
it
up
all.
the CD, I can pick up the vinyl and experience something brand new. If they stop putting stuff out, I've still got so much stuff to catch up on from all this time that I will never run out.
Okay, so how do you discover music?
Well, fortunately, I get a lot of stuff sent to me to review.
Right.
Also, I get news items like one of my absolute favorite new bands is The Last Dinner Party. And I just happened to be sitting there on my phone one day, and there was a news article about them well before their album came out. And I read about them, and I was like, this band sounds really cool. So when the album came out, I just immediately ordered it, and I love it. It was my favorite album for last year.
I love
Yeah.
them.
But different ways. In the radio, I listen to the radio a lot. So
Yeah, but radio is streaming, except it's a different version of streaming.
it is, but yeah, it is. But it's like well, I suppose you don't. It's not curated specifically to me though. That's the thing with a lot of streaming, is it's going to be curated specifically to you. They learn what you like to listen to, and they send you more of that. And you can get caught in a little box. But
I look off recommendations of friends.
yeah, that's
Or
another good way too.
Recommendations from friends.
Yeah.
Brilliant,
Friends.
Bob.
I'm
Absolutely.
discovering tons of new music, new music every year. I'm discovering tons of new music. I saw a band this week playing in Boston, 20-year-old Norwegian art pop band, Pom Poko. There was a bunch of old guys there. It was mainly kids. Most of the audience was kids, but there was a few of us old guys there who cottoned onto them as well. But yeah, you can.
Right.
All you have to do is search. As long as you search, you will
see,
find.
That goes back to what I was saying earlier, the beauty, the wonderful thing about internet radio. First off, as we all know, I'll use Ian's show as a great example. A lot of the music that Ian plays is no way going to get played on commercial FM radio. It's just not, because he's very much into the avant-garde, and he's going to play a lot of stuff that, people are just going to go, what the is that?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But
I've actually
as
turned
he
off
was-
people that way.
yeah, but as Nick, you know better than anybody here that when I was listening to your show, I would hear a lot of music you guys would play. And the one thing I would do is I'd always buy it. You know what I mean?
Buy
So
it.
I always
Buy
paid
it.
for it. I always paid for it. The only time I ever got what I would call free music is when I was part of Nearfest, and people started realizing who I was. So they started, when they would send copies of their, CD or whatever to Rob and Chad, they'd send me a copy too. But other than that, I truly believe that because I'm in the industry, you have to support the artist.
Without a doubt.
Because you know what? If they don't work, I don't work. You know what I mean? I mean, think about that. What I do is live event production. You know,
Right.
so if there's no bands touring,
From my perspective, if you don't buy the music, then the band may not make another album, and I want to hear the next album.
you see,
Oh,
that's it.
exactly.
Thank you.
True.
Thank you very
That's what I
much.
want to
I
hear.
agree.
Keep
I agree
working.
100%.
You know, you can't buy everything you want because nobody can ever buy everything they want because there's so much stuff out there.
Yeah.
True.
But if you really believe in the artist, go to, you know, Bandcamp, go to a record label, buy it. Okay?
Absolutely.
Because as you just said, you might see another one in a year.
Yeah. And as
Absolutely.
Gary
Yeah.
said, and it's so true. I mean, just this year alone, there's 10,000 songs released daily on streaming services.
Oh, sure.
So if it all stopped just today and we went back in time for everything that's ever been released, it would take me a couple
That's
hundred
a lot.
years to listen to everything 24 hours a day.
Well, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah.
That's one time.
Just my CD collection. I was sitting there one day because, like I said, I went to Discogs and started, you know, what are you going to do during a lockdown? So I making up, my list together. The ones I didn't get to, the ones I actually have to physically type in because I don't have the time. But I do realize with the amount of CDs that I have, that if I listen to one a day, I'll die before I get to them all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm 68, so maybe I got a few years left, but still, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
And we keep buying music.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I do. I
Absolutely.
mean, I don't buy as much as I used to because of my age and what I do, things are starting to slow down. Literally, I mean, as of the 1st of January, I consider myself retired. In about a week and a half, my first Social Security check will hit. And what I'm going to do is just pick up like some little like part-time job to keep myself sane or the occasional gigs that I'll get off because I didn't tell any of the companies I freelance with that I'm retiring, so they call me up. It's a right gig, I'll take it. If not, I'll just tell them I'm not available. But
Right.
that limits what I can do. And Nick, I always bought and never took the free ride.
No, I always loved and respected that, and I do that with everyone else. And I kind of do the same thing. Bands will always go, "Hey, you want a copy?" I'd rather buy the copy. I do it all the time. I mean, my collection proves it.
I know. Well, I mean, I understand that if you are like you gentlemen, if you're going to be a host, that you're basically promoting the music for them, then I can understand why
Yeah,
you'll take a free copy, even if it's just files. You know what I mean?
yeah. That's the only time I ever took free copies. I never download stuff. I don't like downloads.
Yeah,
I like physical
I
copies.
do too.
I
Yeah,
like the artwork. I like the lyrics. I like
Totally.
the booklets.
I'm an
like,
absolute big fan of physical media.
I am
It's
too.
just important.
too.
Oh, yeah.
I've got thousands of CDs and LPs, and that is my method of listening.
Right.
I guess I'm the odd one out. I'm
all
all
of my
download.
albums on on hard drives.
Yeah, I've done that
but-
too.
Yeah,
I
but
don't have the
basically,
physical space for the CDs anymore, so I'm 95% download these days.
oh, you just got to buy a bigger house.
Well, he is. He's expanding. No, I have a lot of CDs. People are always telling
You're
me,
gonna get us back on agenda, Ron?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. It's Nick.
All right, yeah.
Sorry,
Let me
down
finish
to
that
that.
so that Ron can talk, because otherwise he won't have time. So my final album is by an artist that started off as a prog artist, but actually back then they were called psychedelic,
Okay.
and the artist is Alice Cooper.
oh,
His first album was Prettiest for You, which was very, very proggy. In fact, it's something that Ian would play because it's very avant-garde prog,
Oh yeah.
But the album that came out in 1975 was a concept album called Welcome to My Nightmare.
Yeah.
My first time hearing him was actually the album before this was Love It to Death, or a couple albums before this was Love It to Death was when I discovered him. But Vincent Price did a performance on here that was classic. It was like you could actually feel like you were listening to or AM radio from like the 30s, and this guy came on with this creepy voice and he was telling you this story about the spider, right?
Yeah.
So this had a lot of great hits, but it also featured the classic lineup, of Jack Bruce, or actually this was right after the classic lineup. It's when he started going through to his vaudeville proggy days, But this thing had so many hits on it. It had Welcome to My Nightmare, of course, Devil's Food, The Black Widow, which was, Vincent Price. Only Women Bleed, one of his biggest hits off
Yeah.
the album. My least favorite. I mean, lyrically, a masterpiece, right? Musically, it somehow didn't fit on the album, even though it was part of the storyline.
It had a bit of a Kiss sound.
Yeah, Cold Ethel was another big one. Steven.
Oh,
Steven would almost frighten you. It was it was about someone coming back to, in your vision that, they were still alive or coming back to life and stuff. Again, classic album. Bob Ezrin produces, who produced a lot of great, rock albums over the years. So that's number 5, and yeah.
so my ex who bought that album and bought the single of that Only Women Bleed, when it was put out in 45, they called it Only Women. They didn't put the bleed because it was controversial.
Yeah.
They thought it was something else. And
Yeah.
so she showed me the 45, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And she says, yeah, I bought it when it came out. She was 5 years older than me, so.
Oh, just before we pick up, you remember the School's Out album?
Oh,
Yeah.
great album.
Remember the record came with
Yeah.
those paper panties on them?
Yeah.
That did not sit well with my mother, because one day I was doing the album, just threw them on the side, forgot to put them away. She came in, what the hell is this? Think what's going through her head. She sees panties on the floor in my room. It didn't go over.
Now, and the thing that was cool about Alice Cooper is all of his albums, they weren't limited edition, but they had special packaging.
Yeah.
So the School's Out was a desk at the like we had back in the 50s, 60s, desktop lifted up. That's where the album slid in, and the legs opened up. It had the panties. Then you had Killers, which had a fold out calendar of Alice hanging from a noose. Muscle of Love, which came with a book cover for your school books and came in a cardboard box that looked like a pizza box. He was always innovative when it came to that. So,
no, they were a great band. In fact, just one quick story before you get on. About 30 years ago, living in Connecticut, I go into a video rental store, rent a VHS tape, and I'm looking at the guy behind the counter, and I'm going, I know this guy. And I finally asked him, I go, you Dennis Dunaway from Alice Cooper? And he goes, yeah. So I'm like, what the? And in my mind, I'm going, what the hell are you doing here?
yeah, no doubt.
So I asked him, I go, I did ask him, what are you doing here? He goes, you got to have a legitimate business so you can write off all the stuff you do when you're on the road. You know what I mean? Because technically, I didn't even know this. He was a hired gun for Alice Cooper. He wasn't a partner in the band.
Well, initially when it was the band, I think he was, wasn't he? Because the whole band was actually a band until
the band was Alice Cooper.
But by the time this happened with me, Alice Cooper as a band had been
but Welcome to My
15
Nightmare
years.
was the first solo album, actually.
Right.
And as I read one of the books from one of the guys in the band, and he said Alice basically had all these people around him going, you don't need those guys. Why don't you just do your own thing? And in the meantime, the rest of the band were like, we should take some time off. And a couple guys told them, look, don't take the time off. If you do, you're going to regret it. And they wound up regretting it.
I mean, Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway, Glenn Buxton, Alice Cooper. Wow, what a powerhouse.
There was another, there's 5 guys in the band, though, wasn't it total?
Right. There was a 5th one, and his name eludes me at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, they were good. I mean, they were unique, and he's still out there kicking ass.
Neil, what was his last name?
Neil Smith, right?
Neil Smith, yeah.
Yeah. He's still out there doing music, too.
I remember walking into I'm from California, so I remember walking into a record store back in the 80s, and I could pick up brand new promos for 25 cents on vinyl, right? It wasn't, name stuff. You wouldn't find like Led Zeppelin for 25 cents.
No.
It was always something off the wall like Ian Gaume, right? That no one knew who he was at the time, or yeah, it was always the Motors, or some band that was just coming up. And I remember walking in there, and I picked up an album, and it was in a white jacket, nothing on it. It just said Michael Bruce, and the album was called, I think it was called Battle Axe, but it wasn't the Battle Axe that he released later on. The only song that was actually still on it was Gina. And I wish I still had a copy of it. I've been trying to find a copy of it. And there was a letter inside. It was self-released promo. There was a press sheet inside that if there was anyone out there that was interested in releasing this, please feel free to contact me. It had his contact info and
Oh my
everything.
God.
And I had a copy of that, and it was stolen years ago, and I've never found it again.
All right.
Wow, that's cool.
All right. Well, I'll give my last one, and it's Paul McCartney's second band, Wings and Venus and Mars.
Oh, okay.
This is a recent one for me in the past 10 years that I got. I mean, I obviously heard the song, listened to what the man said, but I never really dove into his solo stuff and here. But it just, the first, I'm going to call it the Venus and Mars Suite because starts, it's bookend by two Venus and Mars little out, but it goes into that song Rock Show where it's all about it's just talking about a rock and roll band, and Paul obviously is singing on all those songs except for two of them where Denny Lane sings one of my kind of a recent favorite, Spirits of Ancient Egypt, which was a really interesting song. And then the following song after that, Medicine Jar, was the drummer Jimmy McCulloch, I think that's his name. But of course, it has that song, Listen to What the Man Said. I mean, that's good to listen to it in the whole context of the album. Listen to it if it popped up on radio, I really wouldn't have paid attention, but just listening to the whole album all the way through, it's really good. I mean, this was their fourth album, and this is when they got an actual band back after the previous one where there was just three people, Paul, Linda, and Denny, which that had an interesting story. When they were recording it, I forgot where they were recording it. They thought they were going to get it done cheap, and they got ripped off. Literally, they got ripped off. Their equipment was all ripped off. I think they got chased out of the country. So that's where that song "Band on the Run" comes from. But this one, Venus and Mars, really good. I mean, it has out of all of his stuff, I think this is the most kind of like a throwback to the 50s, but with a little bit like in a Beatles style, And a lot of people said, they're not, it's not the Beatles, but hey, it was Paul doing something on a band scale, and it's really good.
One of the interesting things about Wings, Denny Lane was actually a pretty prominent songwriter in that band, which, and if you look into Denny Lane, his history is pretty cool because in the original lineup of the Moody Blues, before Days of the Future Past, he was the main songwriter in that band too. And until the band reformed, it's kind of interesting. He gets sort of overlooked a lot of the time, but he was actually a very talented person, and
And there's two of the band members. Denny was one of them. They call them Hellraisers. They're always getting into trouble. It was him and Jimmy, always getting into trouble. I don't know what degree, but I'm sure probably jail probably happened a couple times.
I always thought their early stuff had a very Beatles sound. It's like he couldn't
Yeah.
really break. He tried to break free, but he really kind of still had that sound
Yeah.
until the live album, and then after that, the sound changed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That live album. I mean,
Wings Over America.
Wings Over America, and then it was on videos called Rock Show.
What was it called?
I don't know why. Rock Show after the second title.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was going, why did they change? I don't know, because Wings Over America sounded pretty good, but I was looking it up to see on Blu-ray. And unless you got a couple $100, it's not available. I really hate that when things go out of print and then people jack up prices.
Go to Discogs.
Or
but
you
today
just
it's more prevalent.
visit thrift stores, and sometimes at Goodwill, you're going to find, $2.
Yeah.
But that's rare.
I have not been that lucky, Robert. I have not. I mean, I keep on seeing on YouTube people, whether it's records or movies, finding all these fun, $2 or $1 sealed copies of things, and I'm like going. So I went to my local thrift shops, Goodwill, Salvation Army. Nothing. It's like got 100 copies of what is it? The Godfather, things like that. It's like no, why don't you
You got to be there at the right time, at the right place. And sometimes you get absolutely crazy stuff. It's sad what I'm going to say, but when people die and people just chuck all the stuff at Goodwill, sometimes you get absolutely crazy stuff. I mean, that's why I've got a Fender and an Ibanez guitar amp, and I paid like $20 for each.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I was a huge comic book collector. I'm still a comic book collector, but my dad took me to a garage sale because they had a bunch of comic books, right? And so I get there, and it turns out this guy had died, right? And his parents decided to sell his whole collection. They were selling them 25 cents each. And when we were there, we're talking to them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, somebody got a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #1 this morning for 25 cents." And I mean, it's not worth what it is now, but it was still worth several $100.
Wow.
I remember going to a pawn shop. I used to go to pawn shops and actually do tours of the state of Florida, me and a friend. And once a week on Fridays, we would go out and hit all the pawn shops from here to Jacksonville, which is, in a straight run, it's a 2-hour drive, but we'd spend a half a day driving upstate and half a day coming back. And we'd have a route, and we had pre-planned where we were going to go. So we knew not to waste time and gas and all that.
Right.
And I remember walking into this pawn shop, and I found a copy of Why Can't Tori Read by Tori Amos.
Oh, yeah.
And it was 25 cents.
Oh my God.
And my face just was like lit up, like, oh my God. And this was at the height of her career, right? When she was still, quite young and really big. I'm going, I can't believe 25 cents. I was just blushing so bad that, or so giddy about it, right? I thought, I'm gonna have to buy a bunch of other stuff so the guy doesn't realize that I found one album for 25 cents that's, gonna be worth something. So the funniest part about that is I bought like 3 or 4 albums, bands I didn't even care. I actually threw them out, I think, in the trash. They were garbage bands. Because they were all like 25 cents, right? I tried to get as cheap as possible. The next day I'm at a record show, and there's someone announcing on the overhead speakers, does anyone out there have a copy of Why Can't Tori Read by Tori Amos? And because this guy's looking for it. And it turns out that someone had it and they sold it for $150.
Wow.
So I mean, they're out there. The finds are out there. You don't know, right?
You just have to
You don't know. you could buy something, not even realizing it's worth something, and bring it home, and then go on Discogs or wherever, and then find out, wow,
Yeah, it's true.
$1,000 or whatever.
I have a lot of CDs that I bought through Bandcamp, and with Bandcamp, you immediately get the download,
Yep.
and then a week, 2 weeks later, depending on where it's coming from, here's the CD. Believe it or not, the majority of those CDs are sitting on the shelves here, and they're still sealed.
Mhm.
I have two Flower Kings box sets that are still sealed,
Wow.
and I have one of the very last Kenso box sets that I got through Tesoro, and that's sealed.
My God.
Yeah, and
I think
and
it's a crime. Now, I understand why you have your seal because you get the download with it, right?
yeah,
But I think it's a crime when someone goes out, they go to a record store, or they go to Amazon, or they go to, wherever, and they buy a sealed copy of something because it's worth a lot of money, and
yeah.
then they won't even play it.
Mhm.
Well, I know guys that
I
do
mean,
that.
if you're buying the music because it's so damn good, play it.
True.
Well, it depends. I think it depends on the attitude they go out with. Like any of us is going to go out, we're looking for music, and when we find it, we're going to take it home. We're going to play it.
Yep.
But some of these guys are just investors, man. They're just looking, whether it's a
Yeah.
record, whether it's a receiver sitting or a set of speakers or it's a car or whatever. They find something, they get it at a cheap price, they're going to turn around and, just unload it somewhere,
Yeah.
I mean, I get that, but,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Among the latest albums that I purchased is Steven Wilson's upcoming album that's going to be released in March. I've got the pre-release purchase, and well, it
Yeah.
sounds like it's going to be really cool because it's an earbook with 2 CDs and 1 Blu-ray. So like,
Yeah. I've got a pre-purchase in on the new Riverside's live album coming out.
Oh,
Yep. Same here.
fantastic.
I'm looking for
That's
that.
a 3 album or 4 LP set. I can't remember. I think it's 3 LP set.
Well, I don't know. I ordered the CD, so I couldn't tell you on that. I'm also looking forward to in a couple of days. I missed. They had a fund me that didn't work, and then they went into pre-sales, which I wasn't aware of. Very soon, they're actually going to put the two new Echoland albums out for sale.
Oh
And
yeah, they'll be good.
that's an
Yeah.
auto buy to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same.
Totally, absolutely.
Two reasons. One, because I just love their music, but two,
They're nice
yes,
guys.
I've happened to become good friends with them. I mean, I've done a lot of I've done more socializing with them than I have actually working with them. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Really
They're
nice
some of the
guys.
best
Great
people
guys.
in the world. I mean, I
Yeah.
love these guys.
Good stuff. Good
Mhm.
stuff.
Well, looks like we did a pretty good show here.
Yeah.
Um,
I had fun.
I had
Thank you,
fun.
Ron, for the invitation. It was
Yeah.
just a pleasure to be
It's
in
always
your
nice to hang out with good people.
we had two
Yeah,
repeats, but other than that, we were good.
And in the case of Nick, I haven't interacted with him in years, so this is great.
Yeah, it's been really nice to see some of you that I haven't seen on video for a long time.
Well, as most people know here, I have a Zoom license. I do Zoom meetings now, and then I'll start sending the invites.
Good.
The good Ron.
And
Yeah.
Kevin, I'll see you tonight.
And also next month. So get your if you want to do it again, I'm going to tackle 1985.
I'm open
85.
if I'm free, man.
I'll take a
Yeah.
look.
Good
Same
stuff.
here,
Yeah.
as long as I don't have a show to go to.
Well, thank
Send
you,
me the
Ron. I
invite.
mean, this was a lot more fun than from watching the shows and see sometimes just this album. Okay, my album. I like the way we were all able to interact and the little stories we came up
Yeah.
with. Very, very
Yeah.
entertaining. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
We
so
are
much.
an entertaining bunch, aren't we?
See you later, guys. Nice to see
I'm
you
the
all.
court jester. Maybe see you
All right.
later, and if not, have a good night.
All right.
All right. Take it easy.
Have a great
Thanks again,
night, guys.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.